In 1925, Packard controlled America's luxury automobile market at the highest level. In every elite neighborhood, there was a near certainty you would find a Packard parked outside a mansion or estate at their peak. They built some of the most advanced luxury cars in the world, powered a massive 40-acre factory in Detroit, and served the richest class of society. They weren't just a car company. They were the definition of American luxury and prestige. Then something changed. Not slowly, but catastrophically. And no one saw it coming. By 1958, Packard was gone. Its factories had shut down, its production had vanished, and its market position collapsed to zero. A brand once associated with kings and elites disappeared into silence. This is the story of how exclusivity turned into overexposure, and how losing identity destroys even the strongest empires. Welcome to the world of Packard, where an empire of luxury was built, only to be slowly destroyed by its own hand. 1890s, Warren, Ohio. Inside a small mechanical workshop, two brothers, James and William Packard, stood over a broken automobile. They had bought it with hope, but the machine failed them badly. That day, it wasn't just a car that broke down, it was their trust in the entire industry. At that time, cars were new and unreliable. Most people still used horses, and even the rich who owned cars faced constant breakdowns. The Packard brothers had limited money and no big backing, while other companies were already ahead in the race. But frustration turned into obsession. They started taking machines apart, learning every detail: engines, gears, systems. Night after night, they worked in their shop. Through trial, error, and repetition, they realized one thing: a perfect machine was possible if you refused to compromise. They began building their own car from scratch. Every part was carefully designed and tested. This wasn't just about making a product, it was about setting a new standard. Slowly, they understood that the industry focused on speed and profit, not true quality. Then came a hard truth. If they followed the same system, they would end up making the same flawed machines they hated. They weren't building their dream. They were following someone else's broken model. They made a bold decision to create their own path. No shortcuts, no compromises, just one goal: to build the finest automobile in the world. It was a risk, but it was theirs, and that decision brought them to Detroit, where a new world was waiting. One where perfection wouldn't just be an idea, it would become an empire. 1900, Detroit. James Packard arrived in the heart of America's growing automobile industry, carrying one clear belief: cars could be built better. In a city full of risk-takers and inventors, he found the one place where his vision could finally take shape. There, talent met opportunity. Skilled engineers, investors, and industrial minds came together. Packard brought precision and standards. Others brought money and manufacturing power. A simple but powerful deal was formed to build a car company that refused to cut corners. Soon, the Packard Motor Car Company was born. It wasn't built to compete on price or speed. Its purpose was clear: build the finest automobiles in the world. Every process, every system, every decision followed one rule: quality above everything. Their first cars entered the market quietly, but the impact was immediate. Smooth performance, reliability, and craftsmanship set them apart. Customers noticed. Word spread. Packard wasn't just another car. It felt different. At the same time, the automobile industry was exploding. Dozens of companies were entering the market, each chasing quick profits. Cheap cars, rushed production, constant failures. It was chaos. Survival depended on speed, not perfection. But Packard didn't follow the crowd. While others focused on volume, they focused on excellence. They weren't chasing everyone. They were targeting the few who demanded the best. It was a slower path, but a stronger one. Then came the defining choice. Packard refused to lower standards to compete with cheaper cars. No shortcuts, no compromises. They chose exclusivity over expansion, even if it meant losing mass-market sales. But quietly, the market was changing. Affordable cars were becoming more popular. The middle class was growing. Demand was shifting toward accessibility, while Packard stayed focused on perfection. Few saw the warning signs. The foundation was strong, the reputation unmatched, but the real test hadn't even begun. 1907, America. The financial panic hit hard. and the automobile industry began to collapse. Dozens of small car companies shut down almost overnight. Factories went silent, investors pulled out, and what once looked like a booming future turned into massive extinction. But not everyone fell. Packard survived. While weaker companies disappeared, Packard stayed standing, stronger, stable, and untouched by the chaos that wiped others out. Survival wasn't luck, it was discipline. As competitors went bankrupt, their assets were left behind. Factories, machinery, skilled workers. Packard moved in fast. Instead of slowing down, they started acquiring what others had lost, turning collapse into opportunity. One by one, the pieces of the broken industry began shifting into fewer hands. Smaller players vanished, and control started concentrating. Packard wasn't just surviving anymore. It was becoming one of the dominant forces shaping the market. With every acquisition and expansion, leadership tightened. Decision-making became centralized, focused, and precise. Packard now controlled not just its own future, but a growing share of the industry's direction. But a new danger was rising. Affordable cars, led by mass production, were changing the market. Companies like Ford were making vehicles for everyone, not just the elite. The rules of the game were shifting. Packard adjusted, but carefully. Instead of competing on price, they doubled down on what made them different: luxury, engineering, and reliability. They refined their identity instead of abandoning IT to AT the same time. They expanded into new engineering domains, building powerful engines, and exploring advanced automotive technologies. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was evolution into a higher class of manufacturing. From the ashes of collapse, Packard didn't just survive. It rose with control, power, and a reputation no one could challenge. 1929, America. The Great Depression hit like a global earthquake. Banks collapsed, factories shut down, and entire industries froze overnight. What once looked like endless growth turned into sudden economic silence across the country. Fortunes vanished within months. Investors pulled out, companies lost funding, and even established industrial giants started bleeding money. Packard, despite its strong reputation, was not untouched by the financial storm. The luxury market froze completely. High-end cars became irrelevant as people focused only on survival, food, shelter, and basic needs. Demand for premium automobiles dropped sharply, and showrooms that once attracted elites now stood empty. Facing survival pressure, Packard made a hard decision. They introduced a lower-priced model, the Packard 120. It was a shocking move for a luxury brand, but necessary to stay alive. They sacrificed exclusivity to survive the crisis. The company shifted its entire strategy. Instead of chasing pure luxury dominance, they focused on volume and survival. Engineering, production, and design were simplified to support a broader market base. New models were introduced with lower cost, but maintained acceptable quality. Packard tried to balance reputation with affordability, adapting their engineering to meet a changing world where practicality mattered more than prestige. Slowly, signs of stability returned. Sales from affordable models kept the company alive. Cash flow improved, and Packard regained a position in a recovering market. Though not at its previous elite level to secure the future, Packard strengthened its production systems, improved manufacturing efficiency, and maintained its reputation for engineering reliability. The focus shifted toward consistency and operational discipline. From near collapse, Packard found its way back into the market, not as an untouched luxury icon, but as a surviving force adapting to a new world. 1945, America. World War II ended, and a new global order began. Factories that once built war machines now turned toward civilian life. The economy restarted with massive momentum, and industries prepared for a new era of growth. A wave of prosperity spread across the country. Soldiers returned home, families grew, and income levels rose. People now wanted cars not just for transport, but for comfort, identity, and progress. Automobile demand exploded across all segments. But Packard was no longer alone. Ford, General Motors, and new international players were scaling aggressively. Competition intensified, and the market became faster, more aggressive, and highly industrialized. To stay relevant, Packard refined its positioning. Instead of only elite luxury, they balanced premium engineering with broader market appeal. Design, efficiency, and production systems were modernized for a faster industrial world. The company strengthened its dealer network across America. Showrooms expanded, supply chains improved, and Packard gained tighter control over how its vehicles reached customers nationwide. Factories operated at full capacity. Large-scale production systems were running non-stop, delivering thousands of vehicles. Packard had become an industrial powerhouse, competing at the highest production levels of its time. Despite scaling up, Packard maintained its engineering reputation. Customers still associated the brand with durability, refinement, and prestige. Trust in the name remained a powerful asset in a crowded market. For a period, Packard stood among the top luxury automobile brands in America. It held strong market influence, respected by competitors and desired by customers who still valued craftsmanship over mass production. In this era of prosperity, Packard stood at its strongest balance of scale, reputation, and industrial power, a symbol of American engineering excellence at its peak. 1960s, America. Young drivers started modifying their Packard cars on their own, changing trims, upgrading interiors, and experimenting with styling. These weren't factory decisions, they were user-driven changes happening in garages and small workshops across the country. Inside the company, engineers and designers began noticing a pattern. Certain modified versions were getting more attention than standard models. At first it looked small, but it hinted at a powerful shift in customer taste. Senior executives were skeptical. They believed these changes were temporary trends driven by young buyers. The idea of redesigning a proven system felt risky and unnecessary to many inside the company. Still, a small experimental program was approved. A limited batch of redesigned vehicles was allowed, just to test market reaction. No full commitment, only controlled risk. The new model arrived with a bold, modern design. Lower, sleeker body lines, improved performance, and a more aggressive identity. It was different from traditional Packard styling, and intentionally more emotional. The reaction was immediate. Demand surged far beyond expectations. Dealerships reported waiting lists, and the new design quickly gained attention across the market. What started as a test became a nationwide craze. The car was no longer just a vehicle. It became a symbol of modern American style. Young drivers, professionals, and enthusiasts embraced it as part of identity and lifestyle. Following success, new versions and upgrades were introduced. Each model refined design, performance, and appeal. The product line kept evolving to match growing expectations. The top, a high-performance premium variant, was introduced. It became aspirational, something people didn't just want, they dreamed of owning it as a status symbol. What started as small user modifications had transformed into a cultural wave that reshaped the entire market landscape. It was no longer just success. It was a phenomenon. 1970s, America. The automobile industry entered a new era. Fuel efficiency, compact design, and modern engineering began replacing large, heavy luxury cars. The entire market landscape started shifting toward practicality and innovation. Customers were no longer impressed by size or tradition. They wanted efficiency, affordability, and modern features. Old luxury-focused designs started feeling outdated and disconnected from real needs. Japanese and European automakers entered aggressively. Companies like Toyota and Volkswagen offered cheaper, reliable, and fuel-efficient cars. The disruption was fast, precise, and extremely competitive. Inside Packard, leadership still believed in traditional engineering values. They relied on past reputation and classic design philosophy. Assuming brand legacy would protect them from change, sales reports started showing decline. Younger customers shifted toward newer brands. Market studies clearly showed rising demand for compact cars, but these signals were downplayed or ignored by leadership. A completely new category of small, fuel-efficient, mass-market vehicles began dominating urban roads. It was not just a trend, it was a structural shift in how people viewed transportation. Packard leadership dismissed this shift as temporary. They believed luxury engineering would always dominate. Investing heavily in compact or economy models was seen as unnecessary and risky. Meanwhile, competitors expanded rapidly. Toyota, Volkswagen, and American mass producers captured both middle and upper segments. They grew aggressively while Packard slowly lost relevance. Inside the company, Production systems became inefficient. Factories struggled with outdated processes, engineering lagged behind modern standards, and internal coordination weakened under market pressure. The decline was not sudden. It was a slow result of ignored warnings, missed adaptation, and refusal to accept change. The market moved forward, while Packard stayed behind. 1980s, America. Packard was now under extreme pressure. Sales were collapsing, dealers were pulling out, and production lines were running below capacity. The entire system was under strain, and the signs of breakdown were becoming impossible to ignore. The traditional luxury model that once defined Packard was no longer working. Large, expensive vehicles were losing relevance. What once made the company powerful was now turning into a burden that slowed everything down. Facing continuous decline, leadership made a critical decision to abandon parts of their old identity and restructure operations. It was an irreversible break from the legacy that built the company. A new plan was introduced: consolidate production, modernize facilities, and reposition the brand. This restructuring was presented as the final solution to restore competitiveness and stability, but the new system carried a hidden flaw. The chosen infrastructure and setup were outdated in design and poorly aligned with modern production demands. Efficiency was already compromised before full execution even began. The workforce also struggled to adapt. Skills, training, and technical expertise were no longer aligned with new industry standards. Execution capability was weaker than what the new system required. At the same time, global competition intensified. Rising material costs and cheaper foreign production made Packard's operations increasingly uncompetitive in the global market. As implementation began, delays increased. Production inefficiencies grew, quality issues appeared, and coordination problems slowed everything down. The plan started breaking down in real time. Instead of recovery, losses continued to mount. Resources were consumed faster than they could be replaced. The new strategy was not healing the company. It was draining it further. What was introduced as the final hope slowly revealed itself as the turning point of irreversible decline, where every decision only accelerated the collapse. 1990s, America. Packard tried to re-enter the modern automotive market, but it was already too late. The industry had moved forward with new technologies, efficiency standards, and global competition. Their reaction came after the opportunity had already passed. By this time, competitors had fully taken control. Brands like Toyota, Ford, and General Motors had strong customer loyalty, established distribution, and massive market share. There was little room left for a late comeback. Inside Packard, strategy became fragmented. Instead of focusing on core weaknesses, the company explored multiple side projects and experimental ideas. Resources were spread thin without solving the main structural issues. A few limited product efforts showed short-term improvement. Sales spikes created the illusion of recovery, leading some internally to believe the turnaround had begun, even though the foundation remained weak. Meanwhile, the market became extremely aggressive. Price wars intensified, and competitors reduced margins to dominate volume sales. Packard struggled to match both cost efficiency and scale. Over time, sales consistently declined. Each quarter showed weaker performance, and market position continued to erode as competitors strengthened their hold. The company gradually became dependent on external suppliers and partners for key components. Internal manufacturing control weakened, reducing flexibility and increasing costs. Leadership instability grew. Key decision-makers left, strategies changed frequently, and internal confidence collapsed. Competitors took advantage of this instability to strengthen further. Losses piled up year after year. Cash flow became unstable, debt increased, and financial operations entered a critical danger zone with no sustainable recovery path. Eventually, it became clear internally that recovery was no longer possible. Market position, finances, and operational strength had deteriorated beyond repair. Bankruptcy was no longer a risk. It was reality. What once stood as a symbol of American industrial excellence finally faded, leaving behind silence where innovation and power once existed. Today, in Detroit, the old Packard site stands completely silent. No movement, no production, no workers. Just an empty industrial space where one of America's most powerful car empires once operated. The world has moved on, but this place feels frozen in time. Broken structures, rust-covered steel, shattered windows, and collapsing walls define the site. Nature has slowly taken over parts of the factory. The silence is heavy, only the sound of wind passing through empty halls. Flashback to the early 1900s. The same place was alive with energy. Thousands of workers, roaring machinery, and precision engineering defined Packard's dominance. It was a symbol of American luxury, innovation, and industrial power at its peak. The fall came from a series of slow decisions, failure to fully adapt to changing markets, dilution of brand identity, and hesitation during technological shifts. Innovation slowed while competition accelerated. Meanwhile, other companies evolved. They embraced mass production, global expansion, and new technologies. While Packard struggled with identity, survivors adapted and captured the future. The center of this story were human decisions. Leaders who once built greatness but later struggled to respond to change. Each generation shaped the company's direction and ultimately, its decline. The Packard name still exists in history books and memories, but the living power behind it is gone. What remains is only a label, disconnected from its original strength and vision. The abandoned factory now stands as a symbol, not just of one company, but of what happens when industries fail to evolve. It reflects the cost of ignoring change. Survival in any field depends on adaptation, timing, and innovation. No matter how powerful a system is, standing still in a changing world leads to decline. What was once an empire of excellence now survives only as silence, reminding us that success is never permanent without evolution.